Relatively recently, and by recently I mean within the past several weeks, Overwatch saw the return of Open Queue Competitive, a competitive format in which all 6 players on a team can choose whichever role they want, with the only restriction being only one of each hero can exist on a team at the same time. This format was the original competitive rule set until large uproar caused the Overwatch team to decide to implement role queue in July of 2019. Once it was introduced, role queue became the only way to play Overwatch's integrated competitive mode. But like everything that's eventually added, the community began getting tired of role queue and wanted something to change. Whether this player disdain originated from the long queue times from certain roles and ranks, or the fact that role queue meant people couldn't flex into a role that a team member was performing poorly in, or even the fact that it was meant the team compositions were always 2-2-2, players began to get more vocal about their dislike in having to play role queue. The temporary addition of hero bans also didn't help due to its poor implementation and repetitive bans that resulted in people just not playing competitive for a week at a time if they couldn't stand the bans. Almost a year after role queue was implemented, Blizzard announced that Open Queue would make a return alongside role queue as a competitive option. Open Queue maintained a completely separate SR from role queue, and I believe that this year-long stint of forced role queue actually improved the experience players now have in Open Queue. For almost a year, people were forced to play comp in the role queue format. This meant that if a player chose to queue as tank, they would be forced to play tank for the entire match. Role switching was not allowed within the match due to logistical reasons with each role having separate SRs. With this format being the only option to play comp, it essentially forced players into a few specific things. By being locked into a role, a player is inevitably forced to experience the ups and downs of that role within 3 different outcomes of a game: a win, a loss, or a draw. As long as the player had some sort of humility and accountability, this gave them the chance to analyze what they did right and what they did wrong in every outcome. Since they are unable to switch into a different role, they get the full experience of the match in one role. Even if the match itself is going poorly, it gives them the opportunity to learn what they can do in that role to potentially turn things around, or what they did wrong to help cause the loss. Additionally, this also restricts players in rage switching, something that is very prevalent in Open Queue. While rage switching in response to a team argument or loss in confidence of the match is still absolutely doable within a role queue, you can't exactly have your main tank give up, switch to Widowmaker, and then proceed to get even less done. Even if they switch to Roadhog on DPS, they're still fulfilling their tank role. They may still get nothing done, but at the very least they are still playing the role they signed up for. Lastly, role queue fixed the biggest issue people had with Open. Players were guaranteed the role they queued for. If you wanted to play support the whole game and not run into half a team of support mains, you could. If you wanted to play DPS, you could after 10-minute plus queue time. With role queue being the standard for almost a year, this ended up satiating those people who desperately just wanted to play their main role. However, even with people who were adamant on mainly playing one role, if they wanted to get credit for playing the entire season, they were still forced to queue and place on the other 2 roles. Additionally, since Overwatch is a team-based game and is often more fun with friends, role queue could often force players to play other roles in the group they were queuing with for one of 3 reasons. 1. The SR spread of the main role is too large to queue in the group, causing them to have to play other roles if they didn't have an ult account. 2. The group had too many main players on one role, forcing someone to off-role. Or 3. They just want to have fun with their friends and don't want to risk their main role's SR. Role queue gave players the opportunity to practice roles they weren't comfortable with while having separate SR from other roles. While some players may be pretty well-rounded with their skill in each role being relatively comparable to each one, some people may have a ridiculously large gap in their role skills. This was an inherent issue with Open Queue, as if people were absolutely forced to change roles, there was a good chance it wasn't a role they could play at the rank they were in. The addition of role queue not only gave people a good idea of where their skill level fell within a role, but also gave them more of an opportunity to play a certain role without feeling out of their depth and giving them more of a positive experience, both personally and for improving their skill. With the re-addition of Open Queue alongside role queue, players are not just given options on how they want to play competitive, but they have also been given time to not only appreciate the freedoms of Open, but also have been given the time to properly improve all of their roles. From my experience, Open Queue has become a better place to experience competitive due to all the points I just talked about. Because role queue still exists as an option, players who absolutely only want to play one role or queue for a role they want to improve on still have that option. This helps to remove, but not entirely, one-trickers from the open queue pool of players. I've seen many more players who are willing to flex to roles the team needs as opposed to what I experienced prior to role queue. The months of forced role queue also likely resulted in overall improved skill of those players that mainly played one role. From my own personal experience, role queue gave me the opportunity to improve my tank and DPS skill. When I placed in open queue, I ended up around where I last left off before role queue took over, which was thankfully not in Masters, where I had climbed to on support during role queue. Being not only in a lower rank, but also having improved my skill and consistency in DPS and tank, I felt much more confident in playing either of those two roles when the team needed me to, making me a much more flexible player. Like I stated at the beginning of the video, this is a very opinion-based topic that was based off of my own experiences. People tend to have widely different experiences in Overwatch's competitive mode, so you may not be having a more positive experience like I am. You may still be getting constant one-trick Genjis refusing to swap because they believe they can pull off Genji against a whole team of counters shutting them down at every turn. I still get these teammates as well, so I'm not saying that role queue completely fixed open queue upon its return. But, from my experiences, I've seen that it's definitely improved it. Special thanks to my Delirious Death Merchants, Damn Volcano, and GTY200, because you certainly have to be delirious to be my highest supporters. Also, thanks to Mauricio Esparza, As Is Light, and Pugs501.